wanted to ask you, the comments you made on Saturday evening obviously created a lot of headlines and a lot of interest. What did you mean exactly by those comments, and what did you want to achieve?
I already spoke about that, and I don't have nothing to add.
But obviously, what you said...
It's Cardiff tomorrow, please.
But you don't want to address at all the fact what you said?
I already spoke about that, and I think I was quite clear. No more than that.
But with all due respect, I don't think you were clear, because you said something that is open to a lot of interpretations. Mm-hmm. People are thinking, did he mean that he's got a problem with the media? Does he have a problem with what people are saying on television? Or is it more serious? Does he have a problem with the sporting directors? Does he have a problem with one of the owners at Chelsea? Obviously, when you make those comments, mm-hmm. you have to accept the fact that people are going to talk about them.
I respect your opinion, and I respect people's opinion, but again, I don't have nothing to add, and my focus is just on tomorrow game, that we can achieve the third semi-final in 18 months since I joined the club.
I mean, props to the journalist for pressing the matter. You've got to say that, as we now welcome in our Premier League insider, David Ornstein. David, this is bizarre from Enzo. Either the club have spoken to him about not speaking as openly as he did at the weekend, or he doesn't want to divulge what was behind those comments. What are you learning is going on at Stamford Bridge?
Well, you've seen there, Cara, he's had the opportunity to elaborate today. He didn't take it, but he did seem to double down on his initial comments, and that will just bring further intrigue. It has led to the suggestion that perhaps he is unhappy with the sporting leadership at Stamford Bridge, and nobody has come out at this point to deny it. Now, of course, there was a run of 4 winless games, and that, I think, has been put down to people I speak to around Chelsea as bringing a bit of an emotional reaction, perhaps. There will have been regular meetings taking place, in particular after Atalanta, of course. And perhaps something was said in those that he didn't like. That's up to him to tell us. Chelsea are a club that are run on a more process-led basis, club-led, in the way that Liverpool are, perhaps, as opposed to being manager, coach-led, like you see maybe at an Arsenal or a Newcastle, and Manchester City. And that means the sporting directors are in control of this. Chelsea have underlined that by backing them, promoting them, rewarding them with new contracts. And we've seen that Chelsea always review their managers. In the case of Mauricio Pochettino at the end of a season, there will be a review, we're told, of Maresca at the end of this season. That was always the plan after 2 years. And if he gets there, we'll have to see what this brings. It's not the first outburst he has had as Chelsea coach. There have been a number. People I speak to around the game suggest maybe he's been emboldened to speak more forthrightly as a result of the progress and success he's been a part of. Earlier this year, he hired George Mendes, the so-called super agent, to represent him. Maybe that's with an eye on the future. Chelsea won't want any of these distractions as they push for another sort of top 4 finish and more trophies. And they'll take a dim view, I would suspect, if this sort of thing continues. Now, many would say that more managerial change could bring further instability. Others will argue that the stability at Chelsea will be formed by the players, by the sporting hierarchy. And I think they're quite happy with where things are going in terms of the fact that I don't expect major business in the January transfer window. That will be more focused on the summer. There are no suggestions coming to me that his position is in doubt. They always seem to be backing him from the conversations I have. But this certainly brings a curiosity and perhaps some hidden messages that we don't know the full extent of at this point in time. All very cryptic.
It was good to see that he had Cole Palmer back and, of course, scored at the weekend as well. Let's move on then. Thomas Frank and his future at Tottenham Hotspur after they suffered another defeat this weekend. Do you think his role at the helm is in jeopardy?
The word coming out of Tottenham Hotspur tonight is that they fully support Thomas Frank and they are backing him. That the leadership at the club, of course, now it's in a more full-on way, the Lewis family, after Daniel Levy was sacked in September. You could say this was a first sort of true test of their control of the club. And everything we're hearing at the moment is that they are squarely behind Thomas Frank and that they want to see improvement in the team. and also, of course, results. Now, it's been a particularly difficult period for them, and there is concern in the fan base, clearly. There are regular meetings taking place, and we're told that within these meetings, of course, Thomas Frank and his position are discussed, but not in an abnormal way. And there's no suggestion coming to us that he is under any immediate threat. Let's see what happens, of course, with the upcoming matches, starting with that tough one against Liverpool. They'll also have the opportunity to improve the squad in the January transfer window. There will be money available if the right profile comes to them and if it will improve the team in their eyes. They like Antoine Semenyo, for example. If it's not going to be him, maybe some other players in that wide attacking position, which is something they looked at last summer with Savinho from Manchester City. It didn't come to fruition. Maybe it will in January. And they'll hope that Thomas Frank can bring the results that over time that he can improve and be an appointment that they stick with, because another change at Tottenham is probably not what the leadership are wanting at this point in time.
Yeah, change isn't always good. Let's turn to Liverpool now. And of course, Salah, he was in the squad, on the bench and then on the pitch, and then really delivered quite a pointed performance after the game over the weekend. What do you think the future holds for Mo, given that he could be away now for potentially a month in the Africa Cup of Nations?
We talked about cryptic messages with Chelsea and Maresca. You could compare that to Salah and Liverpool, because we don't have a full explanation on what has gone on there. But as I understand it, Liverpool fully intend to keep Mo Salah. They want him to remain not only in the January transfer window, but beyond, until at least the end of the season. He's under contract until the summer of 2027. And Liverpool feel that they showed their intentions very clearly by renewing him at great expense back in May. I think their view would be this has been brought about by Salah and his desire to be guaranteed regular football. And that's not something that any club, certainly not Liverpool, despite the legendary status of Salah, are going to be willing to deliver. And that seems to be at the heart of this, at the centre of discussions, which Arne Slot said began before Leeds. So this wasn't the great shock to Liverpool that some have made out. What was, I think, surprising was that he spoke out after Leeds, and that forced them to act. However, they still feel the ball is in his court to decide what he wants to do here. If he really does want to go, is he going to come forward with some proposals? Are his representatives? I'm sure they'll be in conversations. There will be no shortage of interest. We know Al Ittihad in the Saudi Premier Pro League like him. Al Hilal, I'm led to believe, are not so keen, but there would be admiration from all over the European game as well. But this is being dealt with by Liverpool, they feel, in a pragmatic way, taking him out of the firing line against Inter Milan, bringing him back at the weekend. Arne Slot and Richard Hughes in control of it from their perspective, Rami Abbas, Salah's agent, and Salah from their perspective. So we'll have to wait and see what happens now he's away at the Africa Cup of Nations. But from Liverpool's perspective, they are clear. They expect him to remain at Anfield beyond January and for the foreseeable future.
Interesting. Well, you do get a sense that January will be a big telling part of this story. David, thank you so much for your insight, as always, as we welcome you back now into our Premier League studios and bring back in the guys, Tim and Danny. Danny, you haven't had a chance to speak about this whole sort of saga with Salah and Liverpool in the last couple of weeks. I know that you believe that it was quite serendipitous what happened over the weekend, because had there not been the Gomez issue and injury, we don't know if he ever would have come off the bench. Where do you stand now?
I don't think he would have come off the bench, because if you look at the previous games since he'd been dropped to the bench, he came on against Sunderland at half-time, I think it was 0-0. Didn't come on against West Ham, didn't come on against Leeds United, and in both of them games they were winning at a certain point. More so obviously West Ham, because they ended up drawing with Leeds. I think Gomez having to go off injured, you know, they had a couple of players that they could have brought on like-for-like replacements from Gomez, but they were young players that were in the squad. Bradley was obviously suspended, so the ideal situation was you bring Szoboszlai back to right back and then you allow Salah to come onto the field. But it's one of those things where you look at it and you think, this isn't the end of it. This isn't like, OK, everything's fine now. I think if you looked at it from a different perspective, which is obviously the game going as it did, if Gomez doesn't get injured, like I say, I don't think he steps off the bench. I really don't. And I think that Mo Salah's been calculated, and I think from Slot's perspective, he has to let everybody know that he is the manager. It's as simple as that. Because I'm sure, Tim, you will have been in dressing rooms before where if one person gets away with it, other people will think that they can do the same thing as well. So he has to make sure everybody knows who the boss is.
Do you think we see Mo play for Liverpool again?
At the moment, no, I don't. And I may be completely wrong as usual. But I don't think he does. I think it's Slot or Salah.
Well, Tim, you've been Team Mo really throughout this. Did that change anything? What happened on Saturday?
Oh, I've been Team Mo only because I've been trying to see this as very realistically. And I still look at it, and I agree with David. Salah started this problem, right? And he might hold the keys to the solution. What I truly believe is Mo Salah is in complete control of this. What do I mean by that? If Ornstein says, yeah, but I don't fancy you, or we go through a run form, and I'm going to put you on the bench, he is not going to accept that. You can say he's arrogant. You can say he's dealing with it the wrong way. Sure. I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is he's so powerful, he's on so much money, that if he's put on the bench for an extended time and he wants guaranteed football, and you say, well, we can't guarantee you football, he'll leave. Or he'll kick up a fuss or cause a stink in order for this to be a problem. And like we're talking about this now, he's not even with the team. He's currently in Africa. We're talking about Mo Salah. He holds the cards, all of them.
You can't think that he would be completely in control, because he could get benched. Can continue to get benched until he gets a reaction.
Well, or he gets a move.
Result, yeah.
So therefore, go ahead.
No, go on, Tim.
Therefore, I just think he is so powerful at the football club. He can decide whether he's going to play, and if he doesn't play, then he leaves. There's not a situation that I think in the next 18 months that Mo Salah accepts a bit part and a squad role. I don't see that happening, and that is essentially what Liverpool and Arne Slot are asking him. You're not undroppable. Therefore, we're asking you to accept the fact that there are going to be times when you're a squad player. And I'm saying I don't believe that Mo Salah believes that.
And to your point as well, this team for so long has been built around Mo Salah. It's been built around him, which has enabled him. Listen, he's been one of the greatest ever Premier League players. Nobody's doubting that. But his defensive work, he's never had to do it. People had to go at Trent Alexander-Arnold all the time. I felt for him at times, 2v1 all the time. So then when Salah got the ball, he was in a position where he could go and do what he wants to do. Liverpool are finding themselves in a situation now that they haven't been in for a long time, where they need every single player to do their defensive work. So this isn't about Mo Salah not being good enough on the field, on the ball. We all know he's incredible. But I think Slot's looked at it and gone, we're in a predicament at the moment where we can't carry anybody. We can't have any luxury plays. Every single player has to be able to do the defensive side. And I think that's what it comes down to. And that's where I think sometimes people get a little bit lost and go, well, hang on, Mo Salah is unbelievable. He's so good that he should be playing for Liverpool week in, week out. Nobody's questioning that. The question is the off-the-ball side of things.
But is it what they need for the team right now? And the other part of that question is whether Mo Salah is willing to accept that. Let's move on quickly. We're going to touch base on Enzo Maresca. What do you think is going on at Chelsea?
Well, you know, in his comments, he clarified his comments by saying, I don't feel supported. This is the worst 48 hours of my time at Chelsea. He essentially said, it's not the supporters, it's not my players, it's not my backroom staff. So that leaves the media. Why would you pick a fight with the media? I have no idea. Or it's someone above him, whether that's ownership or sporting director. And David quite rightly said, like ultimately, that club is led from the top down. It's the sporting director, ownership. They pick the players and they empower the players. So I think with managers coming and going, and also I think Maresca fired a counter shot by hiring Jorge Mendes and saying, okay, I've won a lot of things here. If you're going to chop and change me, I'll find a really good job too. So this is an interesting one.
Yeah, I don't think it's calculated. I just think he's so emotional. I think he's got to the point where it's like, why am I not getting credit? Everyone's talking about Aston Villa. Nobody's talking about Chelsea. You know, he's been there for a very short amount of time. He's won the Conference League. He's won the Club World Cup. They're fourth in the Premier League now. And what people don't mention as well, they had zero pre-season. They had zero time off. And there's players, you know, I know the fans are getting frustrated with the chopping and changing of the back four. He's having to do that to manage players that are carrying injuries. And I just think he's gone, I want a little bit of respect. I want a little bit of love. And because he's so emotional, sometimes it can come out the wrong way. So
you're not reading too much into it. And he reminded us in that press conference earlier today, they're trying to get into their third semi-final in the last 18 months. He has been incredibly good. And a bit of a sigh of relief, I'm sure, from having Cole Palmer back from that groin injury.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host of NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock.